.NET Core 3 and Blazor with Jeff Fritz.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Hello, I'm your host, Jeffrey Palermo. Welcome to the podcast. Our guest today is Jeff Fritz. And by the way, you can go on to www.azuredevops.show to see past episodes and show notes and all the past content that we have. But today we're talking to Jeff Fritz, and he's the Senior Program Manager in Microsoft's Developer Division working on the .NET Community team. So 4 days a week, you can catch Jeff writing code and teaching folks how to get ahead in the software industry on a live video stream called Fritz and Friends at twitch.tv/C#Fritz. And you can also follow him on Twitter at C#Fritz. That's FRITZ. And read his blog at jeffreyfritz.com, JEFFREY, which is the only way to spell Jeffrey, by the way, and I should know. And Jeff, welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Oh, it's great to talk to you again, Jeff. It's always a thrill whenever we're together and we get to talk about all the cool things going on, either in development or DevOps. Gosh, it feels like we just got together a month ago at MVP Summit.
Well, we did. Well, let's not get us mixed up. So you're the Jeff, and I'm the Jeffrey.
There we go.
That's the only way that our listeners are going to be able to cope here.
Okay.
So
let's do that.
So awesome. So I'm sure we have a lot of people who are followers of the Twitch stream and know you from there. But for the people who aren't, just, why don't you give the listeners a sense of your background and how you came to Microsoft, and then how you ended up being, a video host.
Gosh. Well, I'm going to throw back. Here we go. I'm going to make a call out here. So friends out there listening, our host here, Mr. Palermo, he speaks at a number of great conferences, and it was way back in 2008. I got the speaking bug because I went to Tech Ed in Orlando. And somebody who's sitting across the microphone from me here was giving a talk on MVC and said, well, hey, can you help me out here and come up on stage and write a little bit of code to help out? And this was in a theater session in that Orange County Convention Center. And
900 people.
Yeah, right. And I was that guy that got up and said, sure, and I got up and we wrote some code together on stage. And I got the itch to speak from that point in 2008. I went and spoke at a couple of user groups in my local Philadelphia area, and it became a thing with me, that I wanted to start teaching and getting outside of the little .com that I was working at. And I spoke at Speaker Idol at Tech Ed in 2012. So 4 years later, it took me that long to get back to Tech Ed, Jeff. And Jeffrey, there we go. Got to make sure I said that. I got back to Tech Ed. I spoke in Speaker Idol, didn't win, but I got hired at Telerik. I became a developer advocate for those folks, traveling, speaking at events. And I was speaking on ASP.NET. Microsoft folks saw me and they said, you're doing a lot more of this than we are. Can you help us out? Sure. And I got a job at Microsoft helping out on NuGet and the ASP.NET team for a while. And part of my responsibilities were to continue that outreach for .NET to the folks that are existing developers or that want to learn more to get ramped up to the next versions of the platform. And the blog is a great place to do that. Very searchable, easy for folks to grab onto and look at. But it's not bite size. It's not something that folks can get into and ask questions. It's very much a publish and then read later type of medium, So how do we get stuff into people's hands in a regular way that they feel good about? And I don't know if you feel this way, but I'm a big fan of morning talk radio. There's a couple of great DJs here in my home market
the local radio.
Yeah, the local radio,
Yeah, we have some interesting ones in Austin too. Not the national stuff, but the ones in your city.
Exactly, right? They're friendly, they're outgoing. They do silly gags and every now and again, but you almost feel like a member of their family when you're talking to them. And I was introduced to the concept of Twitch, of live coding, writing code and answering questions as you're going along. And it's something that we had done as presentations at conferences. You'd say, all right, I'm going to show you this demo. And then you'd write the code live. You'd already practiced it a couple dozen times back in your hotel room the night before. But you wrote the code live in front of people and folks thought that was really great. Well, what if we did that on Twitch? I was introduced to it by Suze Hinton, and I took a look, got involved a little bit in watching how she was doing it, how some other folks were doing it, and I jumped in with both feet. It was like, this is a lot of fun. This is something where I could bring that taste of morning talk radio. I want to be outgoing, welcoming, inclusive, right? Everybody's allowed to come in, ask questions. And it just felt right. I was doing it 2 days a week. I opened it up to 3 days a week and said, you know what? Let's do a fourth. So now 4 days a week. And it's going in a direction now where folks tune in and it'll either hang in the background like morning talk radio. I'll bring in guests. I'll write code together with folks. We'll build applications and have a good time together. Right? We want it to be somewhere where folks can ask questions and not be intimidated. There's forums online, folks ask questions, and if you're not at the same level as the moderator, they're gonna throw you under the bus. Oh, that's a junior question. Go over here. That's where those things are. No. Come on. It's okay to ask those junior level questions. We've got folks that are more than happy to help you out. So it's kind of grown and become a very interesting and compelling thing for me.
And that's multiple hours a day, right?
Yeah. So we're live for at least 2 hours each of those 4 days. Sometimes we'll go into a third. Every now and again, I'll run a workshop where that'll go 6 to 8 hours. Mm-hmm. I've got my eyes on a workshop that I want to run that'll be at least 12.
Wow.
That's, yeah, right. When you think about it, it's a lot. But if you can bring in co-hosts, and you can hand off a little bit there, then I get to just be the guy behind the microphone that helps for a little bit while those folks do their thing.
All right. Now, logistically, do you have your commercial breaks built in while you jet off to the restroom?
So when I have done longer format, not 6 and 8 hours, I've got a break scheduled about 4 or 5 hours in. Mm-hmm. But when I've gone to 12 hours, I have done a 14. Was it 14 in the past? We went really long. I didn't have breaks scheduled in there, and we had to kind of figure out when they were going to be. But for .NET Conf, and that's a online streaming event that I help manage for Microsoft, we build in little 5-minute bumpers between each one of the speakers. So at the very least, you've got a 5-minute there. You can jump out and grab a sandwich or something in between each one of the folks. That was interesting. Oh, and Jeffrey, you're going to love this. For .NET Conf last year, we scheduled 32 hours straight. Right? That's like insane. How do you do 32
that's
hours
a lot.
straight? We had folks that were speakers from all over the world jumping in. So whatever time zone you were in, there was somebody local to you that was speaking, and hopefully even in your language. So
nice.
That's cool.
So the listeners, at the time that they're listening, Build Conference was last week. Of course, time of recording, it's in a couple of days. But there's a whole lot of things that can be used now. But of course, we're looking forward to .NET 3. We're looking forward to Blazor, and there's a release that can be used with VS19 Preview now. But you've done a whole lot in that space, both in streaming but also exploring. What are you finding?
So .NET Core 3 is, we're really excited about this. It's so much more that we wanted to put into .NET Core in the previous versions, but there's a certain amount of, you got to get stuff done so that folks have an on-ramp and you can get those first those first bleeding edge folks, right? The pioneers onto the platform. Now with .NET Core 3, because we can bring in Windows Forms and WPF developers, now we're getting really interesting. Now we've got almost parity with what was in .NET Framework 4.8, 4.7.2, 4.7.1, all the older versions of .NET Framework. So it's great to see that parity is arriving. And the speed of the new applications that are built in Windows Forms and WPF, tremendous. Really happy to see that. I've been working on a conversion with a friend of one of those Franken apps. I don't know if you ran into this, but you went from Windows Forms and then WPF started coming out, so you started bringing some WPF features.
You don't quite convert the rest.
Yeah. And you end up with this Franken app. Well, we're trying to cross that boundary of, well, what's our recommendation as Microsoft, as the framework developers, for folks that do have those structured applications? How do we make sure that they can be successful when they get into .NET Core 3? So we're trying to cross that boundary point right now. The designers are coming along very well. We expect to have those shipped in the fall. We're seeing now we have .NET Core 3 Preview 5 released. That was released as part of build. And things are improving. Things are getting better. We're seeing the beginnings of C# 8 being introduced with this version of the SDK. So there's a whole bunch of async features that are coming in there. Async streaming, the nullable reference types that are coming in. Great features that are going to give us as developers more flexibility so we can be more productive, right? That's what all these are always about, all these releases. So C# 8, I'm excited about. I need to personally spend more time with so that I'm more comfortable around those new features. I'm still uncomfortable a little bit around async and await. I always get the heebie-jeebies with those keywords. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Did I do this right? I've got to do all the async things. So I worry about making sure that I have C# 8 down firm in my repertoire as I go forward and I look at the fall conference season, whether it's Ignite or Dev Intersection or any of the other great conferences that are in the fall, VS Live, and that we have a good story for folks. But what's interesting, Jeffrey, is that I'll take that time to learn and I'll do that on stream so that it's not just, hey, let me show you the latest feature, but this is the latest feature, but what does that mean? Let's go explore it. Let's learn a little bit about it. Let's break some things, figure out where the error points are so that we can be better about them, better technologists around those features when we look forward to when we actually need it in production. And I've got to write code for real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Air quotes around that, for real. So there's definitely something to all the great new things coming with .NET Core. Now, we know Blazor was just announced as a full production supported framework. It's not production supported yet. It's in preview, but it's going to be a product. It's out of experimental phase. This is tremendous, right? Because we're moving C# out of just being server side, and you can now run it in the browser, right? WebAssembly, and it's available on everybody's browser. This ability to compile up your code as a DLL, as binary executable code, and Blazor will bootstrap your code with the mono compiler, the mono runtime. I'm sorry, mono runtime, not mono compiler. And you can run .NET code client side in the browser. And it's not just on Microsoft Edge or Microsoft Edgeium or whatever they're calling the Edge version that has Chrome in it, right? You can run it in everybody's browser. And I like to say that we kind of can thank the hackers for this one. Remember we had the Spectre and Meltdown issues?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And everybody's like, look, it slowed down my machines, right? Spectre and Meltdown did the whole thing on the chip where they were hopping, what was it, the buffers or something like that? So everybody had to install updates to their browsers, to their operating systems. Guess what? Everybody's browser, because they had to patch it, now supports WebAssembly. Even grandmom's that wasn't going to be updated because she was on Windows XP. Nope.
Yeah, it's a good point.
It's like, all right, now we're talking. We're not running into that you need to have the Flash runtime installed. No. It's there. So being able to run C# in the browser, pretty cool. But there's also a server-side version of this. Have you seen the server-side version?
I have. I've done a lot of playing around with it. And a few weeks back, we did a show with Rocky Lotka, who has gone deep into it as well. And that's that's the one that we can use right now.
Yes.
Like it actually is production right now. Mm-hmm. Whereas, so help us decipher what people can use literally now and what they have to wait for a little bit.
So anything that's in .NET Core 2.2, which does not include the Blazor stuff, that you can use, no problem in production, full support. In .NET Core 3, you're going to see the Razor components arriving, right? And that's the server-side version of Blazor, which they actually just renamed back from Razor components to server-side Blazor. And what we're seeing is that's going to be fully supported when .NET Core 3 goes out.
Because it uses SignalR as the backbone. That's why it's stable.
Right. And we've been doing ASP.NET for a long time. I remember when we were doing web forms and even a little bit with MVC, you had those magic Ajax panels that you placed on the screen.
Update panel.
Yeah. Whatever was inside the panel.
And then it was Ajax update panel.
Yeah. It would traffic it back and forth with XML HTTP. At the time in 2008, that was terrific. I didn't have to think about writing JavaScript. But now when we look at JavaScript frameworks today, and I want to traffic data back and forth, I've got to write all kinds of code around Vue or Angular or React to traffic stuff back and forth to APIs.
A lot of plumbing.
Ugh, yeah. But now the server-side Blazor, you're right. It uses SignalR, and it puts all that plumbing in place for you so that if you update a component, some area of the screen, and you want to refresh it, it'll make the round trip using SignalR for you. That's really compelling because we're back in that model of I don't need to think about writing plumbing code. I don't need to think about writing significant client-side framework code or even significant JavaScript. Update that section of the window and then go refresh it from the server, and it knows how to refresh it.
There's a whole class of applications that don't require any JavaScript now with that model. And so for teams that are really long-time C# skill set, that's really a boon for them.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. And it means the server-side component game is back on, right? JavaScript components very much, folks, expect to be open source. They expect to be open source. They expect to be...
Because you can't hide the source.
And you can't hide the source?
You can maybe obfuscate it a little bit, but it's there.
I've always thought that, though, about JavaScript frameworks in general. You can't hide the source for that when it's in the browser. So folks can hook and hijack your framework and do funny things with it. So you still have to build validation on the server anyway.
And the client, exactly.
Yeah.
The Azure DevOps podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
We work with so many clients who are .NET shops, and then they say, well, we need a rich, stateful experience in the browser. We really need that to be, it's the modern way to do it. Okay, Microsoft doesn't have an offering. Which one of these JavaScript SPA frameworks are we going to choose? But then the development flow is just so different from the .NET flow, where now there's an offering.
Yes. Right. And the thing with the JavaScript frameworks also was, which one is in vogue this year? Great, we're using React. Sorry, it's 2019. We like Vue. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. All the cool kids are using Vue now.
Yeah, in 2017, it was Angular 4. Well, okay, Angular 8 is coming out soon, so you better get on Angular 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But they have to skip 9 and go to Angular 10 next. Windows did it. iPhone did it. I mean, that's just what you have to do.
You're right. You're right. You're right. Microsoft now effectively has a client-side offering, and it's C# or F#, right? If you can compile down to the Blazor executable that run to the Blazor binaries that run on top of the mono runtime inside the browser, you're in. And it's all open source. That's the beauty of all this, right? Nobody's going to be able to say, well, Microsoft went behind closed doors and it's locked down and it only works on Internet Explorer, blah, 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 blah. No, it's all open source and it works everywhere because it uses that common standard of WebAssembly. Terrific. That's terrific.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting. And I plan to adopt it. I think the prediction here. Well, actually, I have a pretty good track record of predictions. I think it was back in 2008, maybe even 7. I wrote a blog post and I made it clear. I predicted that MVC was going to become the new normal when it came to web application development. And of course, everybody said, no, you're wrong, because this was web forms when MVC was the Community Technology Preview 1 and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And well, now of course, it's the new normal.
Absolutely.
My prediction is that the Blazor model, whether more of it's running on the server side or whether later on when the WebAssembly runtime in the browser is really released, my prediction is that the Blazor model will become the new normal for web applications, because I don't think that customers and people who use the software, just the regular people, really want the original internet document model of transport over HTTP for web applications. They don't give a rip. They just want to be able to pull up a program. You have a screen, you have a button, and if you come back, you don't have to go and do this refresh thing. It just stays around. And if you mess with a certain part of the screen, you're not surprised by the rest of the screen refreshing.
Yeah.
And just regular software, whether it's an iPhone app or whatnot, is stateful, and users are more comfortable with a native stateful type experience. That's why the SPA frameworks have gotten so much traction, because they give that offering. And now with .NET, you can use the same skill set for native desktop, for Xamarin, iPhone, Android, and now for Chrome, Firefox, Safari. And down the road, in Rocky Lock, I said this, you won't care what device, or you, in some cases, you won't even know, hey, does it support the WebAssembly runtime? If so, all right, we're good.
It's compelling not even having to think about that. You're right. The folks that are using our applications, they don't care if you're using Angular, Vue, React, Knockout. It's okay as long as they have a good experience. And yes, the Blazor experience with WebAssembly in the browser is maturing. As the speed of the delivery of all those DLLs, because you do have to deliver the DLLs to the browser, as that speed improves, the barrier is going to come down. Nobody's going to know the difference that you're using WebAssembly or you're using JavaScript.
Right.
There is something to be said about, as a developer, use just what you need. You don't need a giant framework that's delivering all those DLLs if all you're doing is checking the state of a couple of text boxes. No. But if you do want to have that rich experience where it feels like a native application, you're absolutely right. And Jeffrey, I feel like we even feel a little bit of that already happening as people build Electron apps, right? They're hosting inside of the Electron browser shell that makes up Chrome, Google Chrome. They're hosting full web pages and shipping that as an application. We did this how many years ago as applications on the phone? Right? That was Cordova, Apache Cordova, or PhoneGap. But people are doing that now as applications on Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's coming all around circle again, where they want to build native applications outside the browser, but use the browser technologies. Well, why not just use the native application technologies and build applications everywhere and everybody's happy? Because it's segmented. Whether WPF, WinForms, Swift, Java on Android, to use different forms.
The question is, if you're going to build a native application, do we really have to have a native focused development environment that's specific to the native platform? Or can we, and I think Blazor and WebAssembly gives us this promise of, okay, if we were to say that HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, and then C#, and T-SQL is the language combination that, you know what, once developers kind of have that stack, yeah, you can target any computing device on the planet once the computing devices support WebAssembly. It's like the Java in the 90s, Java said, write once, run everywhere. And, you know, it was write once, run in a lot of places, you know, but what's going to push that vision all the way to the conclusion?
The stack you're describing is great for a .NET developer. I would be thrilled to use that. You're going to want to see folks that want to use Visual Basic and F# in there, and that's great. Folks that do Rust, folks that do C++, they can already get in on that bandwagon. I think there's even a Go runtime that runs in the browser now. Terrific. Good. More power to folks that enjoy those technologies. The tool sets are tremendous for folks in the .NET space. There are great tool sets for, I think it's Dart is what they're using as part of Flutter. That's what it is. That's what I'm thinking of. There's a great experience there for those folks, and they don't even know they're writing Dart, right? Dart is kind of secondary because the tooling experience has kind of glossed over that problem. That's great. You know, more power to folks who enjoy that. There's a lot of .NET developers out there.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. Let's give them a great tooling experience so that you don't even care what technology you're using, whether it's the browser or an application, if it's on a mobile phone, a tablet, or on a PC. You're right. One stack and it just works everywhere. Tremendous vision.
Now, you've also been doing some experimentation with Blazor and Akka.net, as I understand it.
So yeah, we're doing some interesting things there on my stream. I typically have a couple of running projects where.
What the heck is Akka for folks?
Oh my gosh! So let's break that down. So Akka is a framework that supports the actor model of development. So if you're an architecture person, if you enjoy talking about software architectures, this next 30 seconds is for you. The actor model lets you build little components, very small components that do one thing and one thing well, and adhere to a common interface, a common abstract base class. And they can talk to each other, passing messages between each other. But as a whole, as an entire stack, you don't care how they're managed. They're started and pushed onto separate processes, separate threads, multiple instances of them. You don't really care about those. You're building these individual little actor objects that know how to do one thing and one thing well. And when I heard that and I saw the architecture for the first time, it immediately clicked for me, thinking of the single responsibility principle, right? Single responsibility principle, write a method, write a class, an object that does one thing and does one thing very well. Great. So what we've been doing is I had a chat bot that I built for a friend on Twitch that managed a faux currency. So in her case, if you watch the show for a certain amount of time, you get a certain number of coins. Great. If you subscribe to the channel, you get a couple more coins. And each month you subscribe, you get a couple more coins. But then you can trade in the coins after a certain amount of time, and she'll send you stickers. She'll send you whatever, little tchotchkes. Thank you for participating and being a part of the community. But she needed a way to manage these. And what she was doing previously was she had a Google spreadsheet, literally Google Sheets online, and she'd yell out to her moderators, "Hey, give Fritz 10 more coins." And literally it was like sneaker net, right?
Yeah.
They'd have the Google spreadsheet open, they'd go down to the Jeff Fritz line and put 10 more coins on. So I made her a bot. It was single threaded, one process, and it would just watch the chat room, and when those events happened, it would update the Google spreadsheet automatically.
Nice. The
moderators loved me because no longer were they having the broadcaster yell out to them, "Hey, make sure you put 10 coins on Fritz."
Right.
So, and when you think about it, that's a simple thing. We know how to trap for events, and as developers, update a spreadsheet or a database makes sense.
Yep.
Updating a spreadsheet, I get the heebie-jeebies as a longtime relational database person. You know what I'm saying, Jeffrey? It's like, What about ACID transactions? I need
That's
to commit.
But what's interesting is that there's object relational mapper drivers for Excel.
Yes.
And I've used them, treating a tab as a table, and it works.
It works. Or there's a library that I've used, link to CSV.
So
you can point to a comma separated file on disk, and it'll return it as a link collection. Each row is a record in the collection that's returned. I'm like, that's brilliant.
Awesome. Yeah. And exporting, creating a CSV. I mean, turns it into one line of code, doesn't it?
It does. And think about it. I can update my database as a GitHub pull request.
Nice.
Easy. So she had that single-threaded, single-process application, but then I had 2 or 3 friends that said, can you make one of those and add this extra little feature for me? So I've forked the code, make it do this extra little thing and whatever. At that point, to deploy changes was a pain in the neck, right? And you have this with desktop applications. I've got to update everybody all at once. And I don't want to get into that deployment model. I've been doing web development for too long. I know there's a better way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to build multi-threaded, multi-channel managing, because it needs to manage multiple Twitch channels, multiple chat rooms at the same time. So how do we manage multiple chat rooms? Well, it needs to be multi-threaded. Well, do I really want to manage a thread pool? No. And the actor model was suggested, and I jumped in with Akka, and I've been loving it. It's great. So I have Blazor presenting the status of, here's the chat rooms that I'm connected to, here's what I'm seeing, here's my log coming out of those chat rooms. And I then have each chat room being managed by a separate actor. So I have one actor that's called the channel actor. Mm-hmm. So I'll have one in Jeff's chat room. I'll have one in Tony's chat room, one over here in Ruby's chat room. And that each one of those creates its own set of actors that it owns and manages that take care of when somebody sends a message into the chat room and to moderate it or do something, or, here comes a command to go do whatever. And those are each managed individually by those top level channel actors. And the framework automatically manages, well, what threads should those be on? Even start deploying that using Kubernetes so that if I get enough pressure, start up another instance of the container and deploy stuff over to the other container. Now we're getting to cloud scale. I've only got 3 channels to manage right now. But when we get to that kind of scale, I've got options. I don't have to go and rewrite anything. I'm using a framework that scales with me instead of preventing me and forcing me to rewrite a whole lot of code. I've really been thrilled with the features that the Akka framework brings to me.
So how is it different architecturally from hub and spoke or a bus pattern? Like if you're in a ASP.NET controller, what does it look like?
So if I'm inside of an ASP.NET controller, instead of using a hub and spoke type model where I would have a repository that's being passed in, and that repository is abstracted away from, or I've got my business objects that are passed in that I can interact with that then work with the repository. I don't actually have to do those things. I'll create a message that is whatever type that I want to do. And it is very service bus like. I'll create a message in the case of joining another channel, right? The show starts up and we need to join the chat room so we can start interacting with those folks. I'll create a message, join channel message, and then send it off to the channel manager actor, the actor at the top, and it'll process it, hand it off, create the appropriate actors, and then listen on the actor system, very service bus like, and wait for messages and hand those off appropriately to the other actors that it needs to create and manage. So I don't necessarily have something that's sitting out there. I don't have to create a service or a worker thread that's listening on a service bus, waiting for appropriate messages on a topic that it's going to deploy. It's listening on the actor system as a whole to be told messages. You tell an actor a message. It knows how to respond to that, go do appropriate tasks, and then either return a response or invoke some other action appropriately. It's been a lot of fun to learn.
Awesome. Well, hey, as we wrap up here, are there any resources or things that you would point to listeners to learn more, either about Blazor or Akka,
So Akka, there is learnaka.net, I believe is the website that they have that living at. Yep, learnaka.net you can go to, and there's all kinds of information there about getting started with that framework. Of course, ASP.NET, you can go to docs.microsoft.com, and you can learn all about the great stuff that's happening with .NET Core. ASP.NET Core is out there as well. You can go out to blazor.net, blazor.net, and get all kinds of great information about how that framework is evolving. And you're going to see, because it's no longer an experiment, it's starting to take on some of the Microsoft branding on that website because it's going to become a real product. Tremendous news going on there. Of course, you can check out my blog at jeffreyfritz.com. You mentioned that earlier. The show's at twitch.tv/jeffreyfritz. And you know what some of your listeners might be interested in?
What's that?
Maybe you're not interested in C# and .NET. Maybe you want to get outside that. You want to check out maybe PowerShell, maybe some folks that are doing JavaScript, some IoT stuff. We formed what's called a team on Twitch, which is, it's when you think about like a pro sports team, right? It's a bunch of folks working together to reach a common goal. Well, on Twitch, we have teams that are similar broadcasters that all talk about and do similar content. Well, we created a team called the Live Coders. So there's folks that are doing PowerShell and database work, F#. There's some Java folks on there, a lot of JavaScript folks as well. You got to check them out at twitch.tv/team, singular/live coders. And there's about 45 different people out there that are broadcasting at all different times of the day, whether you're in Australia, you're in Asia, Europe, in the States, in the Americas. There's somebody that's going to be broadcasting in a time zone close to you in all these great topics. So check it out. It's one page that you can see there, and all 40 some broadcasters are there. We're trying to get that number up closer to about 100 by the year end. But we're encouraging and bringing in lots more folks to build and share our expertise, our knowledge with folks just like you're doing here on the podcast.
Yeah, it looks like several are broadcasting live literally right now.
Oh, yeah. It's a Friday afternoon. Folks like Steve Smith are out there. And there's even folks from the PowerShell team that broadcast on there.
Looks like Clarkio is broadcasting now, and InstaFluff and Codephobia.
InstaFluff, I can't talk enough about. He's such a great guy, extremely friendly, talks about all kinds of different things writing code. He works in C#, he works in JavaScript. Last weekend, he was building a game that runs in the browser. And he really is, he's so friendly, he's a great personality for especially younger folks to watch. Mm-hmm. Really, really great streamer. Another one that I like watching in the evening for us here on the East Coast particularly is Ninja Bunny 9000. So Ninja Bunny 9000, she's a streamer who works in Python. And she's doing all kinds of neat stuff with Python and IoT devices. And everything's purple themed, and don't mess with the Ninja Bunny, Jeffrey.
So on Twitch, it's taboo to use your real name, is what I'm gathering.
Taboo is,
except for James Montemagno. He put his real name in there. Brandon Satram.
There you go. Yeah, he's doing some guys. IoT stuff with Particle out there. And you'll see Robert Tables is in there as well. Robert Tables isn't his real name.
Oh, Bobby Tables. Yeah, good old Bobby Tables.
But I mean, it's okay to use your real name, but a lot of folks like to use a handle or something so they kind of have a channel identity. A friend of ours, Brendan Enrick, he's under Dev Chatter is the name of his show. So really great stuff, and it's an interesting environment to get in and participate in.
Awesome. Well, if anyone doesn't know the meme of Bobby Tables, you can go to xkcd.com/327 and learn about old Bobby Tables.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jeff, thanks for being with me. This is a great time talking about Blazor and Akka and streaming. So I appreciate you spending the time today.
Oh, thanks so much, Jeffrey. It was great being here. And thanks so much to the listeners. I appreciate you tuning in and listening to the podcast.
And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.